Somewhere in your home there is a drawer full of clothes, and this morning you reached into it without thinking. Here's what you were actually doing. You were repeating the single oldest habit your species still performs every day. Older than cooking dinner. Older than talking about the weather. And the reason it started is not the reason you think. You'd guess warmth. Or modesty. Or protection. Reasonable guesses, and wrong, or at least wrong about the order. Because your ancestors were walking around completely naked for about 1,000,000 years after losing their fur, perfectly comfortable, and something specific had to happen before anyone bothered to get dressed. And the way scientists finally dated that moment is one of the strangest detective stories in archaeology. The answer wasn't in a cave. It wasn't in a grave. It was living in your laundry. Here's the story. Start with the part you never think about. Clothes had to be invented late because for most of your species' history they would have been a problem, not a solution. Your ancestors lost their fur somewhere between 1 and 2 million years ago, and they lost it for a reason you still use every day. Bare skin plus sweat is the best cooling system on the planet. You can jog an antelope to death in the midday heat purely because you leak water and it can't. Now put clothes on that machine. Cover the skin, and the sweat stops evaporating. On the African savanna, dressing up wasn't fashion, it was sabotage. So for something like 1,000,000 years, the answer to what did people wear is nothing at all, and they were the best cooled animal alive because of it. Which means the question isn't, why did we start wearing clothes? It's what changed so much that covering your own cooling system became worth it. Now the detective story. Fabric rots. Leather rots. The oldest surviving scraps of actual cloth are only a few thousand years old. The clothes themselves are gone forever. For a century, nobody could date the invention of clothing, because there was nothing left to dig up. Then, in the early 2000s, researchers realized the evidence had been hiding somewhere nobody wanted to look. In lice. The answer to one of archaeology's oldest questions was itching. Here's the trick, and it's beautiful. Humans carry head lice, which live in the hair on your scalp. But there is a second kind, body lice, and body lice physically cannot live on your skin or your hair. They can only live in fabric. They grip clothing fibers, they lay their eggs in seams, and they visit your skin just to feed. No clothes, no body lice. Full stop. Which means body lice could only have evolved after clothes existed. The parasite is younger than the garment, and its DNA is a clock. In 2011, geneticist David Reed at the University of Florida read that clock. Body lice split from head lice at least 83,000 years ago, possibly as far back as 170,000. Sit with that. The invention of clothing was dated not by finding clothes, but by reading the family tree of the insects that moved in. Your ancestors invented something so good that a parasite evolved just to live in it, and that freeloader became the receipt. So what happened 170,000 years ago that made a naked, perfectly cooled species start covering up? The Ice Age happened. That date lands inside a brutal glacial period, the second to last Ice Age. And even in Africa the climate swung cold and dry. The species that had spent 1,000,000 years learning to dump heat suddenly needed to hold on to it. Your ancestors were caught wearing exactly nothing. And here's the physics your ancestors worked out without a single textbook. Still air is one of the best insulators in nature. A layer of hide traps a film of warm air against your skin, and your own body becomes the stove. A draped animal skin is worth several degrees. Fitted clothing, sleeves, layers is worth far more. One estimate puts a simple fur wrap at raising the survivable temperature by several degrees. Tailored layers by dozens. Clothes are a portable microclimate. You are walking around, right now, inside a personal weather system. That's what a hoodie actually is. Then look at what shows up in the archaeology, because the timeline backs the lice all the way. Scrapers for cleaning hides appear early, hundreds of thousands of years back. But around 50,000 years ago comes the invention that turns a skin thrown over your shoulders into an outfit. The eyed needle. Bone needles with drilled eyes appear in Siberia and Africa by around 45 to 50,000 years ago. Tiny, polished, unmistakably modern in design. The needle in your grandmother's sewing box hasn't meaningfully changed in 50,000 years. A needle means thread. Thread means seams. Seams mean sleeves, trouser legs, boots, hoods, clothing with closed air pockets that follows the body. And that upgrade opens the planet. Because here's the hard border. An unclothed human, no matter how tough, cannot survive a Siberian winter night. With tailored, layered clothing, people didn't just survive Siberia, they colonized it, crossed Beringia, and walked into the Americas. Every human being on 2 ice-locked continents got there through a sewn seam. No needle, no America. And we even know what the fabric itself looked like once weaving arrived. In a cave called Dzudzuana in Georgia, researchers found flax fibers 34,000 years old. Twisted, spun, and here's the detail that should stop you. Some of them were dyed. Black, gray, turquoise, pink. 34,000 years ago, someone stood over a pot of dye and decided their thread should be pink. You have never lived in a world where clothes were only practical. Neither has anyone. And the proof of how much a finished outfit mattered sits in one grave near Moscow. At Sungir, about 34,000 years ago, 2 children were buried covered in more than 10,000 mammoth-ivory beads each. Archaeologists estimate each bead took up to an hour to make. The beads lie in rows along the bodies, tracing sleeves, trousers, boots, hats. The fabric rotted, but the decoration kept its shape. Full tailored outfits, 34,000 years ago, so precious that someone spent years of labor decorating them for a funeral. Now the part that never makes it into the pretty version, what making clothes actually cost. A raw hide is not a coat. Leave it a week and it's a stinking board. To make it wearable, your ancestors had to scrape every gram of fat off it with a stone, then work softening agents into the skin, and the softening agents of the Ice Age were animal brains, urine, and wood smoke. Every animal conveniently carries roughly enough brain to tan its own hide, and people figured that out tens of thousands of years ago. Then hours of chewing, wringing, stretching, smoking. Neanderthal skeletons show massively overbuilt right arms. Some of that is spears, and some of it, researchers argue, is a lifetime of scraping hides. So when you toss a hoodie into a washing machine, understand what you're skipping. For most of human history, one outfit was weeks of labor. Killing it, scraping it, chewing it soft, sewing it with a bone needle and animal sinew. Clothes were among the most expensive objects a person owned. People were buried in them for a reason. And 5,000 years ago, we can even meet a man in his full wardrobe. Ötzi, frozen in an alpine glacier. A bearskin hat, a goat and sheep leather coat with stitched panels, goat hide leggings, a woven grass cape against the rain, and shoes with bearskin sole stuffed with hay for insulation, engineered footwear, with separate materials for sole, upper, and lining. That's not a costume. That's gear, built by someone who knew exactly what each animal's skin did best. If you dressed him in modern hiking clothes, he'd recognize every single layer, base, insulation, shell. You didn't invent the system. You inherited it. Here's a side effect you're carrying right now. Your ancestors had teeth and jaws far heavier than yours. Part of what shrank them. Tools took over the work. Once hides could be softened with scrapers and held with cords, teeth stopped being the third hand. Neanderthal front teeth show where from gripping hides. Later humans' teeth show less and less of it. Technology didn't just cover the body. It quietly resculpted the skull you're wearing. And the psychology arrived almost immediately. The moment clothes existed, they stopped being only equipment. Sungir's beads aren't insulation. Shell beads and ochre pigments go back 100,000 years. The instant your species could put something on, it started using it to say who I am. Status, tribe, taste, the entire logic of fashion is baked into the very first outfit. You've never once dressed purely for temperature. Neither did they. Now the honest part, because this story has soft edges. The lice clock gives a range, not a date, at least 83,000 years, maybe 170, and different studies land on different ends of it. Some researchers think simple coverings are far older. Neanderthals survived Ice Age Europe for hundreds of thousands of years and almost certainly draped hides, even if they never cut a sleeve. The needle dates keep shifting as new digs come in. And the real reason is really 3 reasons braided together: cold, tools, and identity, arriving in that order, not one clean eureka. But the shape of the story holds. Naked for 1,000,000 years. A parasite that could only exist after fabric. An ice age that made insulation profitable. A needle that opened 2 continents. And here's the dark little truth at the end of it. Clothes worked so well that your species outsourced its fur. Permanently. You are now the only animal on Earth that dies of exposure in its own habitat without its own invention. A husky can sleep in the snow. You, without your gear, are dead on a mild autumn night in the hills. We traded a built-in coat for a removable one, and the trade is irreversible. Your body has spent 100,000 years quietly assuming the jacket will be there. And the assumption goes deeper than skin. Within a few generations of the first outfit, clothing became a uniform, who's rich, who's holy, who's an outsider. The first thing your species ever made to fight the cold immediately became a way to sort each other. It has never stopped being both. So, the real reason ancient humans started wearing clothes? Because the planet froze, and a naked ape refused to give back the territory. The lice kept the receipt. The needle signed it. And 2 continents worth of people exist because somebody 50,000 years ago figured out how to sew a sleeve. Tomorrow morning you'll reach into that drawer again, without thinking. You'll be putting on the oldest technology your species still uses, a portable climate, a name tag, and a fur coat we can never grow back. Ever wondered? Now you know.